Like the rest of Massachusetts and much of the country, Boston has been experiencing what could be the long-predicted second wave of coronavirus infections. The latest figures from the city show positive test rates in double digits in 7 areas. The highest figures are from East Boston and Dorchester, but they're also at 10% in South Boston. That's part of the area represented by our guest, District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn. Thank you very much for being with us, Councilor.
Chris, it's good to be with you.
Councilor, it seems that you were on to something a few weeks ago talking about the house parties and maybe some super spreading going on, but 10% in South Boston, that looks kind of uncharacteristically high. What do you make of it?
Yeah, Chris, unfortunately, we're experiencing record number of cases across the country, but here in Boston, the numbers are going up again. We're having a lot of young professionals, unfortunately, that are having house parties. I call them super spreaders, and they're having these several times a week. It's a public health crisis. It's impacting everybody, and it's important that everybody respects the public health guidelines and recommendations. And that's no parties, social distancing, physical distancing, mask wearing, and avoiding large gatherings as well. It's important for everybody to participate. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and it takes everybody, and it takes self-discipline to make sure that we can be as safe as we possibly can be.
Well, I know this isn't about people celebrating election results, because you were on Zoom with people from the neighborhood, I think a couple of weeks ago at least. What were you hearing then?
I was, along with Councilor Flaherty, and we had about 90 residents from the community on talking about house parties in the neighborhood. The Boston Police was on, the Inspectional Services was on as well. But what the recommendation is, if there are large parties in your neighborhood, to contact 911. The Boston Police will respond, and if it continues over a period of time, Inspectional Services could potentially put it on a mayor's troubled housing, which means that the Inspectional Services will review the case to see if these parties are continuing, look at the evidence, and find them as well. But ISD is playing a critical role. They're doing very good work, working closely with the Boston Police, with elected officials, and with the community. It shouldn't take this to have people not have house parties. They should not do it on their own. But if they're going to continue having house parties, it's important for residents to contact Boston Police immediately. These are super spreaders.
Well, what I'm picturing these days with parties is that people are doing things they shouldn't be doing, but they're also trying to not go too far. And that means that instead of crowding inside, they might be on the stoops, they might be in the street because they want at least a little more room. Is this what you're experiencing in South Boston?
There's some of that, but then as the party continues, the face coverings go down a bit. And when they add alcohol to the mix, some of their decisions are not the best. And then they gather around as a group. So the social spreading aspect of it is having a devastating impact. And what happens, Chris, is after the party, the next day they might be at the supermarket or the coffee store or the bakery, or just walking on the sidewalk, and they're coming in contact with seniors, persons with disabilities, young families, and they're potentially spreading that coronavirus to people that have already health-related issues. So it's about self-discipline. It's about being respectful to your neighbors. Treat this neighborhood, or treat any neighborhood, as if it was your own neighborhood back from your home community, and pretend that the people you interact with at the bakery are your grandparents or your parents. You want to make sure that your parents and grandparents are safe, and we want to make sure that our seniors here are safe as well. So it's about discipline and respect.
By the way, what I know from being in Mission Hill here is that when people drink, they get louder. That's a quality of life issue. But with the COVID situation, what else does that mean?
It's very difficult for a lot of people to get to sleep on time. It's parties that go on till 3 o'clock in the morning, waking up young children that may have school the next morning or activities the next morning, and seniors as well. We also know that when people have large parties and with a lot of people, the next day there's a lot of trash on the sidewalks and throughout the street. And sometimes, Chris, unfortunately, they get into their automobiles after a night of partying and they're driving. One thing that I work closely with Captain Boyle at C6 is drinking and driving related issues. We want to make sure that our roads are safe, our sidewalks are safe, and we have zero tolerance for people that are drinking and driving in any neighborhood of the city of Boston.
I know loud voices can spread more germs too, but I want to ask you about enforcement for these parties, because sometimes it does get really so bad you do call 911. But what's the standard now? What's the most effective way to crack down on this?
The most effective way is to contact 911 and give as much information to 911 operator as you can. The Boston Police will respond, and after that, I would recommend sending an email to your district city councilor so that they can keep a log of it. And if this happens another time or 3 times, it's important for your district city councilor to communicate with inspectional services and with ONS, which is the Office of Neighborhood Services through the mayor's office. And we would work with ONS, but to make sure that inspectional services does an investigation and review of this house. It's in violation. They're having loud parties, overcrowding, and inspectional service will take a look at it and potentially have put a fine in place.
Councilor, I know you've been concerned about pedestrian safety for quite a while. You've had some really bad crashes in South Boston. Some people have been killed in those. But recently I saw something posted on Twitter. It looked like a man in the middle of Dorchester Street surrounded by people on dirt bikes who were harassing him, maybe doing something even worse than that. What did you make of it?
I had a chance to review the video. I also had a chance to talk with Boston Police about it. From what I can gather, the man was assaulted by many people on dirt bikes. It's being actively investigated by the Boston Police. And if anyone has any information, we want them to contact Boston Police and provide as much information as you can. Watching that video was very disturbing. It was an intentional assault by the owners of these dirt bikes on this pedestrian. It was intentional and it was deliberative, and they intentionally wanted to hurt this pedestrian. That's what I gather from watching this video. But again, I know it's under investigation, and I hope when these people are arrested, they'll be prosecuted under the law.
What about the other situations that are going on? Because at one point during the pandemic, there was a lot less traffic, but also a lot less traffic calming. People were sort of stepping on the pedal a little bit more. More recently, what do you see?
You're right, Chris. A lot of people take this as an opportunity to drive fast because there are not as many automobiles on the street. The current speed, miles per hour, is 25. That is too fast in the city of Boston. I, along with many members of the city council, have advocated reducing it to 20 miles per hour, and with strict enforcement of the current speeding laws by the Boston Police. Driving 25 miles an hour on, East 4th Street or K Street in South Boston is extremely fast. It's extremely, extremely fast in any neighborhood of the city, but also we want strict enforcement of the speeding regulations. There's no reason to be speeding in any neighborhood and going 25 miles an hour. It's about pedestrians. It's about our seniors that are crossing the street. It's about our families crossing the street. It's not about the driver trying to get to the next location a minute earlier. It's about respecting the pedestrians that are on the street in making sure that you abide by the current laws. That's what we're going to enforce. It's an issue I spent more effort on. We're making progress, but there's a lot of work we still have to do.
One other area you've also been working on is language access, and you've been doing this for quite a while with your own Twitter feed in 3 languages, at least 3 as far as I can count. But you've also worked on an ordinance with Councilor Julia Mejia. What kind of access would you like to see introduced that isn't there already?
Thank you for that, Chris. It's another issue I spent a lot of time on. I represent a very diverse district. Chinatown, which has a high concentration of Cantonese-speaking residents and Mandarin, and I have a high concentration of Spanish-speaking residents in South Boston throughout the public housing developments and at the South End, Villa Victoria, Cathedral, and other locations. I have 4 women on my staff, 4 women of color, and they're actually all immigrants. But what we do is we communicate in Cantonese, we communicate in Mandarin and Spanish. But I want to make sure that anyone that accesses city services, regardless of your language, is able to communicate with city officials. I continue to work closely with my colleagues, Councilor Mejia, Councilor Wu, and Councilor McCarthy, when he was on, did a lot of work on language access, as has done Mayor Walsh. But I want to see it greatly expanded. And when city departments go into various neighborhoods, such as the BPDA, if they go into Chinatown, they will go into Chinatown now with proper translators in Cantonese and Mandarin, and I'll coordinate efforts with them. We've had some stumbles along the road at BPS. They've had a major meeting where there weren't Cantonese speaking interpreters provided, but it's a mistake. But I talked to them about it, and we're moving forward, and we address our mistakes and acknowledge them, but also we try to come up with a plan that works for everybody, and we can make sure that our immigrant voices are heard in this city. There's a lot of work to do. We're making progress, and I'm confident we're on the right track right now.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Chris, it's good to be with you.
Yes, and stay healthy.
Thank
Boston
you,
City Councilor from District 2, Ed Flynn. We'll have more news in just a moment.